An old man was sentenced to the electric chair, accused of heinous crimes against a 7-year-old girl, the daughter of a famous police officer. But on the day of the execution, he said something that left everyone there in shock, and the entire city got involved in the situation. Logan was sitting on the defendant's bench, his face showing no emotion, while the judge read the sentence. The courtroom was full, and the silence was absolute. Every word from the judge fell like a hammer, hammering reality into the hearts of everyone present. Logan Reed, the jury has found you guilty of kidnapping and first-degree murder. The sentence is the electric chair. Murmurs began to spread among the people, mixed with sighs of relief and looks of hatred. In the front row, Rosie, the police officer and mother of Sophia, was sitting, her eyes swollen from crying so much but now fixed on Logan. She said nothing, but her expression spoke for itself. Logan slowly stood up when the guards came to take him back to his cell. His eyes met Rosie's for a brief second. He didn't try to speak, didn't try to defend himself. He just kept that look, calm and full of something no one in the room seemed to understand. Rosie pressed her lips together, shaking her head as if she wanted to erase that image from her mind. "He deserved it," someone in the room muttered. "Monster. He killed a child." As Logan was led out, the courtroom doors opened, letting in the sound of sirens and the voices of the angry crowd. Outside, the city was crying out for justice, and to them, Logan was pure evil. Logan barely moved during the trial. While lawyers, witnesses, and experts took turns trying to prove his guilt, he just watched in silence, as if he were absent, far from that place. Every piece of evidence, every accusation, passed by him without shaking his calm. The lawyers tried to persuade him to defend himself, to say something that might perhaps change the course of things. But he refused. "Logan, you need to say something, explain what happened," his defender insisted during one of the breaks. Logan looked at the lawyer with a calm but firm gaze. "It won't help. They've already condemned me, no matter what I say. The truth," he paused, almost as if he were choosing his words carefully, "the truth doesn't matter here anymore." The lawyer was frustrated. He knew that without Logan's cooperation, the chances of reversing the situation were practically impossible. But Logan didn't seem worried. It was as if he were accepting his fate, knowing that any attempt to fight would be in vain. In the final moments of the trial, while the prosecutor gave his closing speech, painting Logan as a monster without remorse, he just closed his eyes for a moment, taking a deep breath. When he opened them, his gaze met Rosie's again, who was watching him with a mix of pain and hatred. Logan didn't look away, but he also said nothing. He already knew what the outcome would be, and to him nothing he could say would change what was about to happen. The streets were filled with a rage that seemed to have a life of its own. Posters with Logan's face, covered with words of hate, waved above the heads of a crowd that grew larger every day. "Justice for Sophia," was the cry that echoed, repeated endlessly by voices full of pain and indignation. Parents held their children's hands, gripping them tighter as they thought of little Sophia and the horror the city believed she had suffered. On street corners, groups gathered to discuss the case, further fueling the collective fury. Logan's image, cold and unfeeling throughout the trial, was the fuel that kept that fire burning. To the city, he wasn't just a man, but the very symbol of evil, fear made flesh. "How could he do that?" asked a woman, her eyes shining with tears of anger. "An innocent child, my God. He doesn't deserve forgiveness." "He won't get any," answered a man beside her, his face tense. "We'll make sure he pays for what he did." Radio and TV programs amplified the sense of revolt. Experts, commentators, everyone had something to say, and it was almost always filled with contempt for Logan. Inside homes, around dinner tables, families discussed the case, trying to understand how someone could commit something so monstrous. But deep down, no one wanted to understand. They wanted revenge, justice, and that would only come with Logan's death. Days passed, but the tension in the city only grew. The fear once hidden was now on the surface, turning Logan into the enemy everyone needed to defeat. Each person saw in him the reflection of their worst nightmares, and the only way to drive them away was to ensure he paid for what he had done. Logan spent his days in a cold and lonely cell, far from the world, far from the chaos his conviction had caused. 3 years passed this way, in an isolation that would have driven most people mad, but he remained strong, almost as if he was at peace with the darkness around him. The grey walls of the cell were his only companions, but he didn't complain. The guard, a middle-aged man with a face marked by time and the harshness of the job, brought his meals on time. At first he tried to make conversation, maybe out of pity, maybe out of curiosity. "You never talk, Logan," the guard said one morning as he handed the plate of food through the bars. 3 years in here and you don't say a word? Don't you feel like talking to someone?" Logan looked up, accepting the plate with a slight nod. "There's not much to say, is there?" he replied, his voice calm, almost gentle. The guard watched him for a moment, intrigued by Logan's serenity. He was used to seeing men despair, lose their minds in those conditions. But Logan was different. He seemed to accept what was coming as something inevitable, without rebelling, without fighting. "Aren't you afraid of what's going to happen?" the guard asked one day, in a rare moment of pause. Logan looked at him and a slight smile touched his lips. "Afraid? No, not anymore. I just want it all to be over." Days and nights blended into one another, but Logan remained the same. He spent hours sitting, staring at nothing, lost in thoughts that no one else could understand. He never asked for favors, never complained about the conditions. He simply waited. And so it was, for 3 years, until the date of his execution finally approached. Logan knew the end was near, but instead of despair, there was only a quiet acceptance. He faced his fate with dignity, like someone who had already made peace with what awaited him, even though the world outside continued to cry out for his death. That night, Logan's cell was colder than usual. The darkness felt thicker, almost suffocating. He knew that dawn would be his last. The silence was broken by the sound of firm footsteps in the hallway. The priest entered, his face serene and his gaze understanding, bringing with him the promise of redemption that many seek in their final hours. "Logan," the priest said softly, his voice filled with compassion, "I'm here to hear your confession, so you can leave in peace with God." Logan, sitting on the small concrete bench, slowly lifted his eyes. He remained silent for a few seconds, as if he were carefully considering his next words. "I have nothing to confess, Father," he replied, his voice firm but calm. The priest stepped closer, trying to offer an escape. "We all carry sins, my son. No matter what you've done, there's still time to find forgiveness. Speaking the truth can ease your soul before the end." Logan shook his head with a slight smile that didn't reach his eyes. "The truth, Father, will die with me. No one wants to hear it. They never did. Whatever I say now, it won't change anything." The priest sighed, feeling the weight of those words. He had been in this position many times before with other condemned men, but there was something different about Logan. It wasn't fear, nor stubbornness. It was as if he carried a truth that the world refused to see, and that he had now accepted to keep forever. If not for yourself, then for those left behind. Ease their burdens, Logan, so they can remember more than just this. Logan looked up one last time, now serious, direct. "I don't need to be remembered, Father. What matters is already lost. Tomorrow, all this ends, and the truth, it ends with me." The priest observed Logan for a few moments, searching for something in his eyes, but found no regret, only a deep resignation. After a moment, he made the sign of the cross in silence and left the cell, leaving Logan alone once more with his thoughts and the certainty that the end for him had arrived long before that night. The next day, Detective Rosie arrived at the penitentiary. Her face was marked by exhaustion, but there was something in her eyes. She passed by the guards, who stepped aside without question, and was led to Logan's cell. When he saw her, he slowly stood up, but said nothing, just waited. Rosie approached the bars, looking directly at Logan without blinking. For a moment, the silence between them felt heavier than any word. "You're going to tell me now, Logan," she said, her voice hard but trembling slightly at the edges. "You're going to confess what you did to my daughter." Logan remained silent, his penetrating gaze fixed on Rosie. He knew what she wanted, but it wasn't something he could give. "Confess to what, Rosie?" he finally asked, his voice low and calm. "What do you think will change?" Rosie clenched her fists, as if trying to keep control. "Everything. If you confess, all of this ends. At least give me that so I can move on, so the city can rest. Say it was you and I promise I won't ask any more questions." Logan slowly shook his head, his eyes filled with a sadness that Rosie couldn't or wouldn't understand. "You know I won't do that. The truth you want, I can't give." Rosie took a deep breath. She leaned in closer, whispering with an intensity that nearly broke her. "Why are you doing this? Tell me, and I swear I'll make the rest disappear." Logan kept his gaze on Rosie without anger, without fear, just a deep resignation. "Because it's not me who should speak, Rosie. You know that." Rosie's eyes flashed with anger. She abruptly pulled back, the words Logan didn't say echoing in her mind. Without another word, she turned and left the cell, her steps quick, almost desperate. Outside, the TV cameras were waiting. Rosie stopped in front of them, her face now transformed into a mask of determination. "He confessed," Rosie said, looking directly at the cameras, her voice firm. "Logan admitted everything. He is responsible for my daughter's death." The words were spoken with a certainty that left no room for doubt, and the reporters immediately began shouting questions. But Rosie was already turning away, walking quickly to leave behind the truth that Logan refused to reveal, but that she herself seemed determined to bury. The tragedy involving Detective Rosie's daughter was a blow that no one in the town would ever forget. Sophia, only 7 years old, disappeared suddenly, leaving no trace. For days, the town was consumed by a frantic search. On every corner, in every face, there was a growing fear that the worst might have happened. When the body of a child was found in a field on the outskirts of town, horror gripped everyone. The news spread like wildfire, and the collective pain quickly turned into fury. The confirmation that it was Sophia, the sweet girl with big eyes and an easy smile, shattered the spirit of the community. Everyone wanted justice. Everyone wanted an answer for that heinous crime. The details of what happened that night were unclear, but to the people that didn't matter. The fact that Logan was identified as the responsible party was enough to focus all their hatred on him. No one wanted to hear doubts or deeper investigations. The pain of losing Sophia turned into a cry for revenge. "That monster needs to pay," shouted a man during one of the vigils held in Sophia's memory. The lit candles illuminated grim faces, full of pain and anger. "We can't let this go unpunished," echoed a woman, holding her own daughter's hand, fearing for her safety. "If he did this to a detective's daughter, what's left for us?" Sophia's story, so full of promises for a bright future, had been brutally cut short, and the entire town felt the impact. Every new report, every comment on TV, only fueled the collective rage. At the school where Sophia studied, teachers and classmates left her chair empty, a constant reminder of the loss. The children didn't fully understand what had happened, but they felt the absence, the sadness that hung over everyone. And while the town mourned, the headlines screamed for justice, demanding Logan's head as the only solace for a crime that no one could accept. To the people, Sophia's death was an open wound, and the only way to close it was to see Logan pay for what he supposedly had done. On the morning of the execution, Logan was led from his cell with the same calm as always, but something in his demeanor showed a new determination in his eyes. The guards escorted him in silence to the room where the last scene of his life was about to unfold. Before entering, Logan stopped, turning to the prison warden. "I need to speak to everyone before this ends," Logan said, his voice calm but firm. The warden hesitated for a moment but nodded, allowing Logan to be taken to a room where Rosie, some officers, and witnesses were waiting. The atmosphere was tense, everyone ready to witness the conclusion of a chapter marked by pain and hatred. Logan looked around, then fixed his gaze on Rosie, who stared at him with eyes full of anger. He took a deep breath, letting the silence hang for a moment before speaking. "Sophia is alive," Logan said, his voice echoing in the room. The shock was immediate. Murmurs began to grow among those present, but Logan didn't take his eyes off Rosie, who had gone pale, as if the ground had disappeared beneath her feet. What? What are you saying? Rosie murmured, her voice trembling, almost inaudible. Sophia is alive, Logan repeated more firmly now. And there's something no one here knows. I'm Sophia's grandfather. Rosie, you know this is true. You hid it from everyone, made it seem like she was dead, but she's alive. She's with her great-grandparents, on a secluded farm, far away from all this. The room was filled with a heavy silence, where every word Logan spoke seemed to vibrate in the air. Rosie tried to speak, but no words came out. Her eyes widened, and her body trembled. "He's lying!" Rosie suddenly shouted, panic overtaking her words. "He's trying to manipulate you. This is just a last-ditch attempt." But Logan remained calm, his voice steady as he addressed the others present. "If you don't believe me, investigate. Go to where Sophia's great-grandparents live. You'll find the truth there. Everything Rosie did was to keep me away from Sophia, to hide the truth about who I am and who she really is." The prison warden looked around, seeing the confusion and astonishment on the faces of the witnesses. He knew he couldn't ignore what Logan had said. The execution room, once filled with a tense silence, erupted into chaos as soon as Logan made his revelation. The murmurs of shock turned into raised voices, confused questions and bewildered looks. Guards, lawyers, witnesses, everyone was talking at once, trying to make sense of what they had just heard. Rosie, who had maintained her composure until now, was visibly shaken. She tried to react, to bring some sense to the situation, but Logan's words had triggered something she could no longer control. "This is a lie!" Rosie shouted, her voice shrill, rising above the commotion. "He's doing this to buy time. Don't listen!" But no one seemed convinced. The prison warden, who had maintained a firm and controlled stance until then, stepped forward, signaling for everyone to calm down. "Wait!" He spoke loudly enough to silence part of the confusion. "We need to verify this information before proceeding with the execution. If what Logan says is true, we can't ignore it." One of the lawyers present, who had been silently watching everything until now, finally intervened. "We need an immediate investigation. If there's any chance that Sophia is alive, we must act now. This cannot be taken lightly." The guards, uncertain of what to do, looked at the warden, who had already made his decision. "Suspend the execution," he ordered, with an authority that left no room for questioning. "This man will not be executed until we clarify this." The room fell silent for a brief moment, as if everyone was digesting what had just happened. The atmosphere, once charged with a deadly tension, was now filled with uncertainty. Rosie tried to advance, her eyes fixed on Logan, but was held back by the guards. She shook her head, repeating to herself that this couldn't be true, but the panic in her eyes told a different story. Logan, still handcuffed, remained calm in the midst of the storm he had provoked. He looked around, his eyes meeting those of each person in the room, and said with a chilling calm, "You'll see that I'm telling the truth, and when that happens, everything will change." The warden gave the final orders, and Logan was taken back to his cell, while the execution room quickly emptied. Logan's revelation had altered the course of events in a way no one had expected, and now everyone knew that the conclusion to this story was far from what they had imagined. Following the suspension of the execution, Rosie found herself at the center of a storm she had helped create. Desperate to maintain control of the situation, she began speaking to journalists, giving interviews, trying desperately to discredit Logan. "He's lying," Rosie told every reporter who held a microphone in her direction. "Logan is a manipulator, a demon who took my daughter's life. He's just trying to confuse us all to escape justice." But as the words left her mouth, something in her tone, in her eyes, didn't seem to fit. Before, her anger and pain were convincing, but now there was a nervousness in every gesture, a hesitation that didn't go unnoticed. During a live interview, a reporter questioned her directly, looking her in the eyes with an intensity that made her falter. "Detective, if Logan is lying, why not allow a full investigation to prove it?" he asked, his voice firm and clear. "If Sophia is truly with God, as you've said, the truth will come out, won't it?" Rosie hesitated for a moment, long enough for doubt to settle in everyone watching. She swallowed hard, feeling the weight of growing distrust around her. "There's nothing to investigate," she replied, but her voice faltered slightly. I know what happened to my daughter. We can't let a dangerous man like Logan continue to manipulate us." But instead of calming suspicions, her words only fueled them. People began to wonder why she was so reluctant to allow an investigation. The looks that were once filled with sympathy and solidarity were now full of questions. Rosie started to realize she was losing control of the narrative. Her gestures became more nervous, her answers more evasive, and every time she tried to reinforce her version of events, more doubts arose. Even her closest colleagues began to doubt. Conversations that used to happen behind closed doors now spread through the corridors of the police station. "Have you noticed how she's acting?" one officer murmured to another. "She doesn't seem like the same Rosie. Something's wrong." Logan, still waiting in his cell, could feel the impact of his words growing like a wave, and Rosie, instead of containing it, was being swallowed by it. The doubts about the story she had worked so hard to tell began to erode the trust the town had in her. And each time Rosie tried to discredit Logan, her own words came back to haunt her, like a dark reflection of what she was trying to hide. The pressure was becoming unbearable. With suspicions growing and the town increasingly divided, the police were forced to act. There was an urgency in Logan's statements that could no longer be ignored. The police chief, an experienced and respected man, called a meeting with his most trusted team. "We need to investigate this once and for all," he said, looking at each of the detectives present. "We can't let this doubt continue to eat away at our community. If Logan is lying, we'll prove it. But if he's telling the truth, we have a duty to reveal it as well." One of the detectives, Carl, spoke up. "But Chief, what if this is just a ploy by Logan to buy time?" He crossed his arms, clearly skeptical. The police chief stared at him for a moment, considering the gravity of the situation. "I understand your concerns, Carl. But this is no longer just about a man trying to escape justice. The integrity of our entire system is at stake here. We need to get to the bottom of this, whatever the outcome." The decision was made. They would start immediately, beginning by locating Sophia's great-grandparents, as mentioned by Logan. A small team was assigned to the investigation, including Carl and 2 other experienced detectives. That same day, they set out for the isolated farm Logan had mentioned. The road was long, leading them to a part of the region few knew. The tension in the car was palpable, everyone aware that this investigation could change everything. Arriving at the location, the group was met with a tranquil landscape, almost untouched by time. There was a small house on top of a hill, and the team exchanged glances, the weight of the mission clearly on their shoulders. "We're about to uncover the truth," Carl said, trying to mask his anxiety. They approached the house and knocked on the door. An elderly couple, Sophia's great-grandparents, answered. There was surprise in their eyes, but also a calmness that contrasted with the tension of the detectives. Carl stepped forward, showing his badge. "We're from the police. We're investigating some recent information. May we come in?" The elderly couple exchanged glances and then silently opened the door, inviting them inside. Inside the house, the silence was broken only by the soft sound of the wind outside. The investigation began, and the truth Logan had hinted at seemed more real with each passing minute. Carl, looking around, knew they were about to uncover something far bigger than any of them could have imagined. Inside the small house on the hill, the silence was almost oppressive. The detectives, driven by a mix of duty and growing suspicion, began asking questions to the elderly couple who had welcomed them. Sophia's great-grandparents, sitting side by side on the sofa, maintained a calm expression, but there was tension in their eyes. Carl observed every movement, every word. Something in the air indicated they were about to discover the truth. "We're here because of Sophia," Carl said, his voice firm. "We received information that she might be alive and in your care. We need to know if that's true." The couple exchanged a long look, as if deciding whether to share what they knew. Finally, the elderly woman, with a soft and tired voice, responded, "She's here." The detectives looked at each other, surprised by the direct response. Carl's heart raced and he tried to stay calm. "Can we see her?" he asked, trying to hide the urgency in his voice. The old man nodded, struggling to his feet and signaling for them to follow him to a room at the back of the house. Each step felt heavier than the last. When the door to the room was opened, The detective stopped at the entrance. There, sitting in a small chair near the window, was Sophia. The same dark hair, the same bright eyes, but now older than in the photos everyone knew. She looked at the visitors with curiosity, not fear, as if she had already known this day would come. "Sophia," Carl murmured, almost unable to believe what he was seeing. He approached slowly, kneeling to be at her level. "Are you okay, sweetheart?" Sophia nodded, her eyes fixed on his. "Yes, I'm okay," she replied, her voice sweet but firm. "My great-grandparents take care of me." The elderly couple approached, and the woman placed a hand on Carl's shoulder. "We've taken care of her since everything happened. It was to protect her from what could come. Rosie, she didn't want anyone to know." Carl stood up, the weight of the revelation hitting him like a blow. Everything Logan had said was true. Sophia was alive, hidden all this time, far from everyone's reach, while the town mourned her supposed death. "We have to take her with us," Carl said, his voice trying to be gentle but barely able to hide the gravity of the situation. "She needs to be safe, and the truth needs to be told." The couple agreed, knowing they could no longer hide Sophia. As they left the house with Sophia safely between them, Carl knew that the world outside was about to be shaken by this discovery. Sophia was alive, and with her, the truth that would change everything. The discovery that Sophia was alive changed everything. The news spread quickly, and what once seemed like a closed case now transformed into a complex investigation full of twists. With Sophia safe and under police protection, the detectives began piecing together the puzzle Logan had hinted at. Carl, who had led the discovery, was the first to start questioning every detail of the case. He reviewed the files, looked again at the evidence, and slowly, a pattern began to emerge, a pattern that pointed directly to Rosie. "We need to approach this with cold, clear logic," Carl said, gathered with his team in a room full of documents. "There are too many points that simply don't make sense unless we consider the possibility that this was all planned." They began to examine the evidence, and what once seemed conclusive now appeared manipulated. The crime scene photos, the testimonies, even Rosie's accounts, everything had small inconsistencies that, when added together, revealed something much bigger. "Look at this," one of the detectives said, pointing to an old photo of Sophia. "The clothes that were supposedly found with the body don't match what she was wearing on the day she disappeared. And there's more, the DNA. The samples were tampered with." Carl nodded, feeling the weight of the truth closing in. Rosie used her position to control the investigation from the start. She knew how to manipulate everything to point to Logan, and she knew that with the town in a fury, no one would question the version she presented. The detectives looked at Carl, shocked by the gravity of the situation, but one question still hung in the air. "But why? Why would Rosie do this?" one of them asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Carl took a deep breath, understanding that the answer was as devastating as Rosie's actions. "Because Logan is Sophia's grandfather," he said, his voice heavy with the revelation. "Rosie wanted to keep him away at any cost. She faked Sophia's death to incriminate Logan and ensure he would never get close to her." The room fell silent as everyone absorbed the magnitude of what had been revealed. Rosie, a respected detective and grieving mother, had manipulated everything to create a devastating lie, all to protect her secret and ensure Logan was punished. Now, the truth was clear, and Rosie's downfall would be as brutal as the scheme she had constructed. Orders for her arrest were given, and the detectives, who had once trusted her version of events without question, now prepared to face the reality that they had been manipulated. Rosie, the woman everyone thought was a victim, had become the true villain of this story, and the truth was finally about to come to light. Rosie's trial was swift but intense. The town, which once saw her as a devastated mother seeking justice, now watched in disbelief as all her lies were exposed. The proof that she had faked something so macabre about Sophia and manipulated the evidence to incriminate Logan was irrefutable. In the courtroom, Rosie sat on the defendant's bench, her once proud face now marked by exhaustion and despair. There were no more tears, only the weight of the inevitable. The prosecutor, without a trace of mercy, presented every detail of the crimes she had committed: the kidnapping of her own daughter, the falsification of documents, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy to destroy Logan's life. Logan was present in the courtroom, observing silently, his eyes fixed on the woman who had tried to destroy his life. There was no hatred in his gaze, only a deep sadness for what it had all come to. When the judge finally pronounced the sentence, the room fell into absolute silence. "Rosie Sanchez, this court sentences you to 33 years in prison for kidnapping, obstruction of justice, falsification of evidence, and related crimes. Your actions have caused immeasurable pain and suffering, not only to Logan but to this entire community that trusted you. Justice demands that you pay for your crimes." Rosie closed her eyes as she heard the words, as if trying to shield herself from the impact. But the reality was unavoidable. She would be taken away, and everything she had done to keep Logan away from Sophia now resulted in her own separation from her daughter. As she was escorted out of the courtroom, Rosie looked at Logan one last time, but he did not return her gaze. Sophia, now under the care of the witness protection system, was far from there, shielded from the storm her mother had created. As Rosie was led to prison, the town began to process what had happened. The woman they believed to be a victim had revealed herself as a cold manipulator, and the man they judged as a monster was now seen as a victim of the greatest injustice. The 33 years Rosie would spend behind bars wouldn't erase the suffering she had caused, but they marked the end of a story filled with pain and lies. And for Logan, although justice had finally been served, the path to healing was just beginning. When the news that Logan had been cleared of all charges spread, the town that had once condemned him without hesitation began to change its stance. The streets, which had once echoed with cries of hatred against him, were now filled with reflective silence. People began to understand the extent of the mistake they had made, and a collective guilt began to spread. On the day Logan was released, the sun shone brightly, as if the very sky recognized the injustice that was being corrected. When he stepped out of the prison gates, there was a crowd waiting for him. But instead of the harsh, hateful expressions he had faced before, the faces were filled with remorse and shame. There was a moment of silence as he took his first step outside. People looked at him, as if waiting for some reaction, some sign of how they should act. But Logan just stood there looking at the crowd, his face calm with no traces of resentment or bitterness. Then someone in the crowd started clapping, and soon others joined in. The sound of applause grew, filling the air with an intensity that seemed to carry all the repressed emotions of that time. It wasn't just applause of celebration, but of apology, of deep regret. The town was trying in some way to ask for forgiveness for having been led by fear and anger. Logan remained silent, but his eyes were moist. He had lost 3 years of his life, marked as a monster. But now, finally, he saw the humanity that still remained in the people around him. A woman approached, her hands trembling, and looked at him with tear-filled eyes. I'm so sorry, Logan, we were wrong. I was wrong." Her voice faltered, but she needed to say it. Logan looked at her for a moment, and with a low and gentle voice replied, "I know. It's okay now." More people approached, some crying, others just mumbling apologies, and Logan tried to respond to each one. He couldn't change the past, but he knew he needed to move forward. Those applause, those apologies, were the first step for him and for the town to start healing the wounds left by everything that had happened. As Logan finally walked away from the crowd, the applause continued, accompanied by looks of respect and admiration. He was a free man, not just from the accusations, but from the burden he had carried for so long. And as he walked forward, he knew that the path ahead, though difficult, would be walked with the dignity and strength that had sustained him until then. Despite being acquitted and finally free, Logan knew that the greatest challenge was still ahead. The victory in court had cleared his name, but it wasn't enough to erase the years of separation between him and his granddaughter, Sophia. He knew it would take much more than words to regain the place that had been taken from him. At their first meeting, Sophia was sitting in a small, cozy room under the care of social workers. She looked at Logan with cautious curiosity, but also with a distance that broke his heart. The girl he had known so long ago was now grown, shaped by experiences he hadn't been there to share. Logan entered the room slowly, trying not to startle her. He sat in a chair across from her, taking his time, and took a deep breath before speaking. "Hi, Sophia," he said, his voice gentle but full of emotion. I'm your grandfather." Sophia looked at him, her big eyes full of questions. She didn't respond immediately, just continued to study him, trying to understand who this man was, someone she had believed to be a stranger until recently. "I know it's a lot to take in right now," Logan continued with a sad smile. "And I don't expect you to accept me right away. I just want you to know that I'm here, and that I've always been, even if you didn't know it." Sophia finally spoke, her voice small and hesitant. "Are you really my grandfather? Why didn't I know?" Logan felt a tightness in his chest at the question. He knew there wasn't an easy answer. Because things happened in a way they shouldn't have. But what's important now is that you're safe and I'm here. I want to get to know you, Sophia. I want to be part of your life if you'll let me. She was silent for a moment, processing his words. There was a mix of emotions on her face, confusion, curiosity, perhaps a bit of fear. But there was also a small opening, a possibility that, with time, she might allow Logan into her life. "I don't know how to feel," she said, almost whispering, "but I think I want to get to know you too." Logan felt his eyes fill with tears, but he held back his emotions, knowing he needed to be strong for her. "And I'll be here whenever you want. We'll take it slow, one step at a time, okay?" Sophia gave a small, shy smile. It was a beginning, a first step on the long journey they would have to take together. Logan knew it wouldn't be easy, that the path to reconnecting with his granddaughter would be full of challenges, but in that moment, sitting across from her, he felt hope. And for Logan, after everything he had been through, that hope was enough to keep going. The weeks that followed were marked by a mix of anxiety and hope. Logan and Sophia had several supervised meetings, trying to get used to each other's presence. Each meeting was a small step, full of discoveries, but also of uncertainties. Finally, the day came when Sophia was allowed to live with Logan. The decision was made after many conversations, evaluations, and the consent of both. When Sophia arrived at her new home, still shy but more confident, Logan was waiting for her at the door, his heart racing with a mix of joy and nervousness. "Welcome, Sophia," he said, opening the door and stepping back a little to let her in. Sophia looked around, taking in every detail. The house was simple but cozy, filled with light and personal touches that Logan had added to make her comfortable. A small table with books, a soft sofa, and a room decorated in soft colors, all prepared with care for her arrival. "Is this where I'll live now?" Sophia asked, still holding her backpack. Logan nodded, smiling. "Yes, it's your home now. Our home. You can arrange things however you like. If something isn't to your liking, we can change it together." She walked to the room that would be hers, running her hand along the walls, the furniture. Everything was new, different from where she had lived before, but there was something comforting in knowing that this place was now hers, that she had a space to call her own. Logan followed her, stopping at the door of the room, watching as she explored. "It's going to take time for us to get used to all this, Sophia, but I want you to know that I'm here for whatever you need. We'll learn to live together one day at a time." Sophia dropped her backpack on the floor and turned to him, her eyes finally meeting his with more confidence. "I think I'll like it here," she said, her voice still a bit hesitant but sincere. Logan smiled, feeling a wave of relief and happiness at hearing those words. That's all I could ask for. The days that followed were filled with small moments of reconnection. They got to know each other better, sharing stories, laughter, and even a few tears. Logan showed Sophia how to take care of the garden, and together they planted new flowers, symbolizing the new beginning they both needed. At night they dined together, talking about what they had done during the day, trying to build a routine that gave them a sense of normalcy. There were challenges, of course, moments when the silence felt heavy, or when memories of the past threatened to bring shadows, but they were determined to move forward. Sophia slowly began to trust Logan, and he, in turn, did everything to be the grandfather she needed, someone she could rely on. And so, after so much time apart, grandfather and granddaughter began to rebuild their lives. Each day brought a new opportunity to heal the wounds of the past and to create new memories together. Logan and Sophia's story became a symbol of strength and perseverance, something that many in the town would never forget. From the moment the truth came to light, their journey was marked by a courage that few could comprehend. Logan, a man who had lost everything, fought to prove his innocence and, more importantly, to regain what truly mattered, his granddaughter, Sophia. With each challenge, with each suspicious look they faced together, Logan and Sophia showed the world the power of unconditional love. Logan never gave up, even when it seemed impossible. He endured the pain, the loneliness, and the injustice with a dignity that impressed everyone. And when he finally found Sophia, the connection between them, which had been forcibly torn apart, began to rebuild, a little more each day. Sophia, for her part, showed admirable resilience. Though young, she carried with her a wisdom gained through the hardships she had faced. Alongside Logan, she learned to trust, to forgive, and, above all, to understand the value of truth. She knew that her grandfather's love had never wavered, even when everything around them seemed to fall apart. "I will never leave you, Sophia," Logan told her in one of the many quiet moments they shared. "Whatever happens, I will always be by your side." And Sophia, with eyes shining with trust and affection, replied, "I know, Grandpa. I'll be here with you too." The desperate search for the truth is what brought them back together, but it was love that kept them together. In every conversation, in every simple act of care, was the proof that despite all the lies and pain, the truth had prevailed. And that truth wasn't just about what happened, but about who they were to each other. A family. Logan and Sophia became inseparable, their lives now intertwined by bonds stronger than ever. Their story, though marked by suffering, became a beacon of hope for everyone around them. It reminded everyone that, even in the most difficult circumstances, love and truth could triumph. And so together, grandfather and granddaughter continued their journey, knowing that what they had faced had only made them stronger. What the future held was still uncertain, but they were ready to face it side by side with the same courage and love that had guided them this far. After everything they had been through, Logan and Sophia decided they needed a fresh start, far from the places that carried so many painful memories. Together, they chose a house in the countryside, surrounded by green fields and ancient trees, where the air was pure and tranquility seemed to be part of the landscape. On moving day, Logan and Sophia arrived at their new home with the few belongings they had decided to bring. The house was simple, but welcoming, with a porch that overlooked a small stream running in the back. Sophia got out of the car first, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the peace of the place. "It's even more beautiful than I imagined, Grandpa," she said, with a sincere smile that made Logan feel at home for the first time in a long time. Logan smiled, placing a hand on her shoulder as he looked at the new house. "I knew you'd like it. Here, we can start over, without the shadows of the past haunting us." They spent the day unpacking, arranging the rooms and exploring the surroundings. There was a small garden in the back, where Sophia immediately decided she wanted to plant flowers and maybe even start a vegetable garden. "Will you plant with me?" she asked, already imagining the colors that could fill that space. Logan nodded, excited by the idea. "Yes, we will. This place is ours now, and we can make it whatever we want." That night, after a day full of work, they sat on the porch listening to the sound of crickets and the murmur of the stream in the distance. The sky was clear, dotted with stars, and for the first time in a long time, Logan felt true peace. Sophia, by his side, seemed calm, as if this place was beginning to heal the wounds of the past. "I like it here, Grandpa." Sophia's voice broke the gentle silence of the night. "I think we're going to be happy here." Logan looked at her, his heart filled with hope. "I think so too, Sophia. This is our home now. Far from everything that happened, we can finally live in peace." And so in that quiet corner of the world, Logan and Sophia began a new life. Far from the shadows that once pursued them, they found a place where they could be themselves, where the past was just a distant memory and the future was full of promise. The countryside, with all its simplicity, offered exactly what they needed, a chance to start over together. As the months passed, Life in the countryside brought the peace that Logan and Sophia so desperately needed. But even with all the tranquility of that place, something was still missing. Sophia missed her great-grandparents, who had taken care of her during the most difficult times. Logan also knew that their presence could further help in rebuilding their lives. One afternoon, while planting flowers in the garden, Sophia looked at Logan with a special sparkle in her eyes. "Grandpa, do you think the great-grandparents could live here with us? I miss them." Logan stopped what he was doing and looked at his granddaughter, realizing how much it meant to her. He smiled, knowing it was the right thing to do. "I think that's a great idea, Sophia. Let's invite them. It would be good for all of us to be together, like a real family." Wasting no time, Logan made the call to Sophia's great-grandparents, who still lived on the old farm. They were surprised but deeply touched by the invitation. After all, they also missed Sophia and wanted to be close to her, and at the same time start healing the wounds the past years had left. In no time, the great-grandparents arrived at the new house. Logan and Sophia welcomed them with open arms, with warm smiles and eyes bright with anticipation. There was a quiet joy, a sense that the family was finally complete. "Welcome to our new home," Logan said, as he helped unload the few things they had brought. "You're part of this family, and this place is yours too." The great-grandfather, with tears in his eyes, shook Logan's hand and then pulled him into a hug. "Thank you, Logan. This means a lot to us. We're happy to be here together." The great-grandmother, meanwhile, was already beside Sophia, hugging her lovingly. "We'll take care of each other, as we always have," she said with a tender smile. The days that followed were full of life. The house, once quiet, was now filled with conversations, laughter, and the sound of familiar footsteps in the halls. The great-grandfather helped Logan with the chores around the property, while the great-grandmother taught Sophia how to cook recipes that had been passed down through generations. Slowly, they created a routine that made the house pulse with the energy of a united family. On the porch at the end of another day, Logan, Sophia, and the great-grandparents sat together, enjoying the sunset. It was a simple moment, but full of meaning. They were all there, after so much time and so many challenges, ready to move forward. "It's good to be together like this," Logan said, looking at each of them, feeling a deep gratitude for that moment. "No matter what happened before," added the great-grandmother, her voice gentle and full of wisdom. "What matters is that we're here now and that we're a family. And so in that countryside home, Logan, Sophia, and the great-grandparents formed a truly united family, where love and understanding guided their days. There, far from everything they had faced, they found the peace and happiness they had long sought. Logan's story, which began with a tragedy and a devastating injustice, slowly transformed into something much greater. What was once a tale of pain and suffering was now told as a powerful lesson of hope, redemption, and the unbreakable strength of family love. The people who once condemned him now saw Logan as an example of resilience. He had faced the worst trials, was wrongly accused, lost precious years of his life, and almost lost his granddaughter, Sophia, forever. But instead of being consumed by hate or bitterness, Logan chose the path of compassion and forgiveness. That choice wasn't easy. There were days when the weight of the past seemed unbearable, but Sophia's presence, the affection of her great-grandparents, and the peaceful life in the countryside gave Logan the strength to keep going. Each day, he rebuilt not only his life but also Sophia's, offering her the love and security that had been denied for so long. Their story began to be told by others. Neighbors who once feared approaching them now came to listen to their experiences and learn from their journey. Gradually, Logan's name, once associated with tragedy, began to be remembered as a synonym for strength and redemption. "You're an example to all of us, Logan," said one of the neighbors during a visit. "What you went through, and how you came out of it all, with your family by your side, is proof that love really conquers everything." Logan, with a humble smile, replied, "It wasn't easy, but I was lucky. I had Sophia, her great-grandparents, and the support I didn't even know I needed. In the end, what really matters is that we never gave up on each other." That message of love and perseverance echoed throughout the town. People who once judged without thinking now saw in Logan a man who had overcome the impossible, not for revenge, but for the love he felt for his family. The story of Logan and Sophia, of a family that rebuilt itself from the ashes, became a source of inspiration. Logan knew that the past would always be part of him, but he chose not to be defined by it. Instead, he built something new, something beautiful, from what had been broken. His life became a testament to the fact that, even in the darkest circumstances, love can light the way, offering hope where there was once only despair. And so, Logan's story, which was once marked by tragedy, transformed into an unforgettable tale of hope, redemption, and the unbreakable strength of family love. A story that would never be forgotten and that would continue to inspire those who heard it. If you enjoyed this story, I humbly ask you to leave a comment and share what you learned. I would love to hear your thoughts. Don't forget to like the video, and at the end, I'll leave some other emotional stories that I'm sure you'll love. Goodbye.